leave it alone. Looks like we've got more people now that they're all jammed in together, don't I don't know why I feel more nervous about introducing it than I do about talking, but I think I'd have usually had a plan by now. That's where I'm going wrong, mate. I haven't had a drink yet. Alright. Well, I can't help your ears, mate. Just turn it into the T position, you'll be fine. Alright, so thank you all for coming. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Gareth Evans. I run Evans & Co. Hospitality Accountants. I'm an ex-chef, and yeah, that's who we look after. So places like this, here, the Arts Bar, Ian, wherever he's gone wandering about. And today you've got the privilege of me not speaking as much as I normally do. So I'm going to do the intros, and then the Q&A at the end, and that's about it. So we should theoretically finish a little bit quicker than when I'm doing them myself. So without any further ado, we will introduce Joe McDonald from 200 Hospitality, and I'll let him do his own intro just to keep it a bit quicker.
Thank you. Love it. Hi, I'm Joe. I'm the founder of 200 Hospitality. We are a training company that looks after multi-site groups up and down the country to help them to attract the best people for them, train them faster and cheaper, and retain them for longer. Now, before I start, I want to tell you a little story about my first general manager job. I was 10 years ago, and I definitely blagged my way into the role. I'd give myself 10 out of 10 for enthusiasm, but I was definitely underqualified. And if I'm really honest, I didn't really know what I was doing. The biggest problem that we had was recruitment. The venue was called Parkville Cafe, and it was at the Royal Melbourne Children's Hospital. And I think the reason that people weren't applying, I mean, I put job ads out and I got crickets, just nothing. And I think the reason people weren't applying was they were taking one look at the job ad and it said Children's Hospital, and it said Parkville Cafe, which meant nothing. And they just said, no, I'll move on. I'll try and find somewhere fancy. There was a lot of good people, it's a real career hospitality city, but I just wasn't getting the applicants. One of the big mistakes I was making, among many, was I was complaining about this quite loudly one day to one of the team. And I said, why have we just not getting any people in? Why is there no one applying? He says, geez, I'm pulling my hair out. Yeah. And I was really pulling my hair out. I was getting frustrated, I was getting demoralised. I kind of felt like I was at the mercy of the team that I had. And I said to Faye, who was one of the team there, I said, what is it that you like about working here? And she turned to me and she said, I like having my weekends free. And you see, we didn't trade Monday to Friday. Sorry, we only traded Monday to Friday. So we didn't trade Saturdays, we didn't trade Sundays. This facility was in the Royal Children's Hospital. It is a world-class facility. It has got a 30-foot animatronic butterfly in the foyer. There is an aquarium, there's a massage parlour, there's a gym, there's a Subway sandwich stand, there's a McDonald's, there's performers who go around, like doing tricks and magic for the kids, and there's even like a sanctuary, a meerkat sanctuary that's maintained by the zoo. It is a really amazing space. It's more like a theme park than a hospital, but I couldn't write all of that in a Gumtree job advert, could I, right? So I had a look at my job ads, and I think I'd mentioned that we were operating Monday to Friday, but I wasn't really making a big deal out of that. So I went and changed the ad, and I think I just changed the title to something like, Get Your Weekends Back. That was really the only change I made. I set the ad, it was the end of the day, it was Friday, I set the ad up, and I went home for the weekend. I opened up my inbox on Monday and there was over 200 applicants for this barista job. I'd had that ad out for a week and had about 10 people apply. So that one change meant that our bottleneck for growth was completely gone, right? We had, all of a sudden, well, I was no longer short-staffed again, but the other thing that really changed was I had the choice of who I got to work for us, not just in terms of skill set, but in terms of character, in terms of attitude. And it put me back in, as I mentioned earlier, it put me back in the driving seat. There's a real psychological change of when you feel like you're being held to ransom by your team. Can I say no to that holiday request because it really doesn't work for the business? Can I enforce this standard? What are they going to do if they don't like it? They're going to leave. But if I haven't got anyone to replace them, I'm a little bit disempowered, or I'm not really able to do my job properly. So it was a huge shift, and we actually used that methodology for all of our sites. We found something unique about every single site that we opened that meant that we were the first choice for when somebody had multiple offers for jobs. We actually took that company from one site, my site, to 18 sites in 3 years, using that exact method. So my question today is, what if 2024 could be your best year ever? What are the things that we can do? Oh, wrong one. Cool. What are the things that we can do that can be the bottleneck release or the bottleneck changer for you? So we're going to look at some very quick, very powerful, and some very actionable tools that we use with our clients to make sure that they turn their biggest cost, their teams, into their biggest asset. Okay, so I genuinely believe that building your teams and investing in your teams is one of the most highly leveraged activities you can engage in. Because, well, there's more of them than there are of you, right? If you can spend an hour training your team and they can go and be, 5 times better, 2 times better, 50% better, they're going to serve far more guests than you ever could, right? Investing in your teams, and when you get to multi-site level, when you get to 2 sites, 5 sites, 10 sites, it's imperative, because you can't be everywhere at once, right? We've also got the minimum wage increase coming up. Second time it's gone up, right, in the space of a year. So essentially now, you're paying for a whole team of supervisors. What you used to pay a supervisor is now your minimum rate that you have to pay everybody, right, over a certain age. So you might as well get the best value out of them that you can. And I don't think that training your teams, I don't think that investing in your people is a luxury anymore. I don't think it's something that you can just do ad hoc. I don't think it's something you can do on the fly. I think it's something that now needs to be systemized, because I think it's a commercial reality that we need to be getting 100% out of our people. I don't think it's optional. Okay, this is my favorite book. This is what we base a lot of our teaching on. And it's called The Service Profit Chain. It was made by some very clever Harvard people. And it's a great book. 300 pages later, an awful lot of data points, thousands of data points, loads of graphs. It basically boils down to this. Employee satisfaction is, well, what they essentially did is they found that there was a link between employee satisfaction and profits. And it was the first book to ever do so. What has happened as a result of this book is a lot of these big companies have reprioritized employee satisfaction and made that link then between employee satisfaction and the rest. So we'll just go through it really quickly. Employee satisfaction is essentially boils down to 3 things. It's when you've got a team who understands what's expected of them. It's when you've got a team who is motivated to perform. And it's when the team has got the tools to perform. So that means tools can mean anything from equipment to adequate lighting to being warm enough at work. But it can also mean having the right enough team around them so that they're not short-staffed and they're not overstretched. Okay? So team satisfaction, if we boil it down to those 3 things, if we can nail those 3 things, they can't help but create happy guests. A happy team, it has to create happy guests. That's all they can do when they're happy, when they're motivated, when they've got the tools. They just perform. And this is why this is the most highly leveraged thing you can do. If you've got a team, and you've got a team around you, is to empower them to create happy guests. Happy guests create loyal guests. Bit of a no-brainer, right? You've got a great experience, especially in the service industry. People are going to keep coming back to you time after time. And then loyal guests, obviously, as we know in hospitality, that's where all your money is, right? They're quicker to acquire, they're more forgiving when things go wrong, they're easier to upsell with, and they give you the best feedback too, right? Like, you want to know how your business is really treating your customers, you talk to your regulars, don't you? So, loyal, and then guest loyalty turns into profit, and then the trick here is to make sure that we're reinvesting a little bit back into the team to make sure that they can keep doing that work for us, right? And it's the best examples that I see of companies at the moment in the UK who are absolutely crushing it. They get this, right? We've got like the likes of Hawksmoor. These companies they only started 10 years ago. Hawksmoor started in 2015, 16. They're about to turn over like 90 million or 100 million or something crazy. And they're really well known for investing heavily in their teams. Permanently Unique Group, Tattoo, Phoenix, they're opening Louise, I think it is, in Manchester. They're on like 25, 30 million a year. Like, they started 8 years ago and they invest really heavily in their teams. Flight Club, 22 sites, 3 countries, they're opening in Liverpool end of this year. Invest heavily in their teams. These are all independents who started with one site, they prioritise their teams, and their teams go and crush it for them. So there's a lot of good reasons for this, but for me, this is like my call. It's like good hospitality is always downstream of having the right team. So good hospitality that means something to people, means something to its guests. Good hospitality that turns a profit is going to be downstream of having a good team. It's not possible to do this if you don't have a good team around you. Because you're only one, if you're the manager, you're the owner, you're the area manager, you're the GM, you're only one person, right? So you need a good team. They need to do the work for you. A few more stats. I pulled this out of I'm use my laser pointer. I pulled this out of the book. 78% of restaurants with above average customer satisfaction have a good above average employee satisfaction. Did I say that right? Yeah. And then this is a little case study from us. I'm better at training teams than I am at making graphs. But this was 2022. One of the guys we came in with, and we had, and that's just 30% negative reviews. And then the next year, less. And all we did, really, was focus on the teams. We didn't change the food. We didn't change the layout. We didn't do a big refurb. We didn't focus on marketing. There was bits of improvements here and there, but basically what we did is built the teams. We created a place where they were happy to work. We created an environment, we listened to them, got their feedback, found out what was important to them, made it happen, and that was the difference from the guests. The guests didn't know. That's just the data that came off the back of it, right? And this year they're fully booked. They're doing record revenue. This goes on and on and on. But they've done the hard work of getting it over the line, and now they're going to reap the rewards of that for years. Okay, so if team satisfaction is the goal, if that's the lighting fuse that we need to crush it, let's say, there's going to be some obstacles, right? The first one is, what if you can't find the staff? What if no one good applies, right? What if you're me in Parkville Cafe back in the day, making all my mistakes? So you're not alone. There are 170,000 unfilled roles, unfilled positions in the UK today. And half of UK venues have reduced, I'll get tangled up here, half of UK venues have reduced their opening hours in the last year due to short staffing. And it doesn't seem to be about food quality, it doesn't seem to be about having a big profile or a big name or a big following, because we've got Michelin star venues that are closing. We've got celebs like Ottolenghi. I read an article in the Times last week, and he's added his name to the list of people who are struggling to get people. He's got books, huge profile, internationally known. You can't get the staff. So it's not enough to just have a big name anymore. And it's not about food quality either. Lagavroche, Roche, perfect pronunciation, I'm sure, would give a massive start to all these huge chefs. Gordon Ramsay, Marco Pierre White. They closed in 2020. They stopped their lunch service in 2021 due to a lack of staff. And they never reopened again. And in January this year, they closed for good. So it's not enough to just have good food either. There's something else at play. So what you can do when you just can't find the staff. So the first thing we always say to clients is think of recruitment as sales, right? It's about features, not benefits. Don't make the mistake I did, which is create a shopping list of jobs, 40 hours a week, make sure that you've got 2 years of experience, must be prepared to work a flexible rota, blah, 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 right? Like, because they're just going to click next. Not interested, right? So find, and then that leads us to the next thing, which is have a USP, have a unique selling point, right? Parkville, you could argue, is pretty easy for me, right? Anyone would bite your hand off to work Monday to Friday in our industry, but there's always going to be something really cool that you can offer, and sometimes it's just about digging a little bit under the surface to try and figure out what that might be. So, what makes you different? And another really cool one is what's your purpose beyond making money? Why did you get into hospitality? What's your story? What is it you do? What's the feeling that you give that no one else gives? What's the reason you get up in the morning? Can you sell that journey? Can you sell that vision to somebody else? Update your digital touch points is a really good one. It gets overlooked quite a bit, but if you think that somebody's going to look at your job ad and then hit apply these days and not look you up on Instagram, on your website and everything to see what the kind of vibe is before turning up to an interview or trial shift, no chance. They're going to look you up, right? The example I gave earlier, Tattoo, they're brilliant at this. You go on their LinkedIn and they've just got post after post after post of appreciation, celebrating their team. This person did this sick thing today. This person just got a £50 meal voucher for our restaurants because they're so cool at this. Like, that's free, right? All right, there's the food cost of the 50 quid, but what's that, 15? You know, like, that's basically a free thing you can do, and that says everything to the team that's in the venue that they matter, but it also says everything to people who are coming in to apply, right? And then my last one for this is hiring for personality over skills. I know this is a luxury. I know sometimes we get to the point where we just need someone with arms and legs, right? But if we can hire for personality over skills, hiring for a good cultural fit, and then teach them the skills afterwards, that's always really, really strong because they'll stick around for longer. They'll naturally want to do a good job. They'll naturally gel with the team that you've already got. So that's a really cool one. This is a little free resource from us. It's on our website. If you go 200hospitality.co.uk/unicorn, it's a free download to. It's basically a what would you call it? What would you call it?
Self-assessment.
Yeah, like a worksheet thing. Yeah. And there's a podcast that goes along with it as well that explains how to use it. It's a system that you can use to eke out what would be a cool thing that you can offer that means that people are going to go, wow, this place is sick. So yeah, that's on our website if you want to have a look at that. Okay, so what happens if nobody good applies? So we've got a skills gap in the industry. There's less and less people with management understanding, with training understanding. There's just less and less people with knowledge of what to do and the rest. There's a few applicants that do come through don't have any experience. So with this one, we would suggest it's better to find the right people and train them up rather than trying to assess for skills. This is how we structure our training. So we break it down into 3 very different, very distinct areas. We've got standard, style, and substance. The reason it's important to break these up is they perform very different things, and they build something out. They build something in for the employee as well as build something in for you, as well as building something in for the guest. But you can't teach them all at once. So let me just explain what I mean by this. So standards are your non-negotiable, person-independent brand standards. Something important like we don't give someone the option, we don't leave it to the servers in a restaurant setting, we don't leave it to the server's discretion to ask when our guest has an allergy requirement, a dietary requirement, right? It's really important to get that right. So we standardise that. So you have to ask them when the menu goes down on the table. You have to ask them at the door. Whatever it is, we standardise that. Things like recipes, right? They're standardised. If someone orders a double cheeseburger, we don't leave it up to the chef to decide they've got a single patty in there or 3 patties in there, right? It's a double, it's 2, it's not negotiable. Whoever makes the burger has to make it the same every time. The guest gets consistency. So we need to have standards. But then what you also need to have is style. Style is the thing that the server gets the freedom, or the staff member or the manager, whoever it is, gets the freedom to inject themselves into. How do they get to do it differently than other people? So style is personality and flair. Style gives that team member ownership over their role, right? We don't want to be numbers, and we tend to be people in hospitality. We want to be able to do our thing our way and express ourselves, and people love to get involved and they want to have ownership of what they're doing, and they want to see themselves in their job. So you've got to give them space for style. So standardisation is super important, But we don't want like a McDonald's style service where everything's the same and there's no connection there, right? Because we've got Deliveroo for that, we've got vending machines for that, right? So hospitality happens here. And then the final one is hospitality also happens here at the bottom, substance. Substance is when you have everything adapted to the guest. So substance is like the emotional intelligence bit. Substance is if you had a table of 2, an elderly couple eating a meal and one of their dishes came out a bit later than the other, you wouldn't say, guys, you want some flaming sambucas to say sorry, because that probably wouldn't go down very well. You'd probably say, but if you say, can I get you a dessert, that would go down a lot better, right? Making generalisations here, but generally speaking, whereas if you've got a group on a hen do, if you said to them, can I get you one dessert, they're going to go, what are we going to do with that? But the flaming sambucas would go down really well, right? But you can't teach that to a kid. You can't just say to an 18-year-old on their first shift, here's a menu, learn the steps of service, go do hospitality, right? It doesn't work. There's so much more to it. When you can break it down into these 3 areas and be specific about what you're training and specific about when you're training it, all of a sudden you give them so much freedom in the area that you want to give them freedom in, but you're not giving a monkey a machine gun, right? You're not just giving them, yes?
You want you in the frame,
Oh, right.
not next door.
I don't know you're recording. Yeah, so you don't want to give them too much freedom because you want to make sure that they are doing the job that you need them to do, and you want to make sure that your guest gets a consistent experience, right? But you've got to give them some space, and then you also want to teach them emotional intelligence, because this is where also your top line revenue comes in. This is where your upselling happens, right? Knowing who to upsell to what and when. How to build that relationship so you've got that influence. All of that happens down here. It doesn't happen in standards, and it also doesn't happen in style. It all happens when you adapt things to the guest. And it also builds that will be back energy, right? That repeat customer that we talked about, that's where all your money is. So that's training. All right, so what do you do when no one good applies? So we said training. The other thing I'd say is don't pull your money down the drain. Okay, you want to get them trained up, but I don't advocate for giving everybody a 2-week training course where it's one-on-one with the manager. It's just not economical, right? So we need to find a way to do it that's quick and cheap. And that means scalable. You can train 2 people, 3 people, 5 people all at once, 10 people all at once, a whole team all at once. You don't want to do it one by one, and you want to do it as quickly as possible so that you're not pouring money down the drain with that new person. So building a training program, absolutely key. Write down your standards. Cool, so write down your standards and making sure that they're written down once so that they can learn them en masse, they can learn them before they start, they can learn them at home, they can learn them on the bus, they can learn them. The other cool thing is, even if they do it at work, it's not taking up your time as the owner or the manager, right? If you're having to have 20 conversations with 20 staff members to get a message across, it's very quick, it's easy to see how that's not economical for you, right? Whereas if we can write them down, if we can write them down once and get everybody else to read them, that's really good time, right? Test your system and then test your staff. So we've got to always check for understanding. It's not enough to just say, "Oh, you had a training session on that." Well, it was 9 months ago. And if we've not checked learning, if we're not reinforcing the understanding, it's not actually going to go anywhere. It's not going to stick in with them. And then finally, once it works, assign an in-house trainer who is crucially not your manager. For the managers in the room, I know you're busy. For the owners in the room, you know your managers are busy, right? An in-house trainer is a really good way of somebody demonstrating that they're ready for a management role. So we don't recommend it be the manager. Use it as someone who's a supervisor, who's got promise, and you think they can take on more responsibility. But don't give it to your manager because they've got enough to do. But assign someone whose job it is to make sure that everyone's hit these training measures, right? And then finally, including a formalised upselling training as soon as possible. Can't recommend that enough. The difference of good upselling training and how fast it can be done, like it can be done on somebody's first week if you attack it right. But it's upselling, as we know, it's critical for profit. You have to be doing it. Your team has to be empowered to do it. Okay, so that is training. Okay, so my favourite. What if the staff keep quitting on you? Retention rates are at an all-time low. They have never been worse since records began. We have got as high as 80% in some areas. It's shocking. I think, where's Gareth? I can't find it. Didn't you say Liverpool was better than most cities?
Yeah, it's got 58%
58%. Okay, so that means if you're at, let's say you're at 58%, that means obviously if you've got a team of 50 in your team, you expect 30 of them to not be there by this time next year. It's pretty shocking. And I don't think it's actually possible to build a successful business in hospitality if your retention rate is that low. You need it to build a culture. You need it to make sure that you're not pouring money down the drains. You need to make sure that you're not pouring money down the drain with the training. You need to make sure that it actually has time to take effect, and for the people in the business to positively influence one another. But we need to bring that down as fast as possible. The cost of replacing an employee is somewhere between. I mean, I did a whole talk on this a couple of months ago, but it's somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000 per person. So that is everything from the cost of putting a job out to the cost of training a new person, the lack of productivity before they leave, any under the table things as well that we don't want to think about, and then of course the time of your managers or your trainers to replace that person. Yeah, it's about 5 to 10 grand. And also lost sales opportunities because you were short-staffed, or lost sales opportunities because you didn't get that upselling training in early enough. So it really, really adds up. If you think every staff member losing costs you 5 to 10 grand, and there's massive data to support that, it's pretty scary. And then finally, 40% leave in the first 30 days, so they don't actually make it past the probation period. So all that time and energy, all of that effort, all of that cost, you get 100% of that cost in just by getting someone to their first 30 days. But you won't realise any of the benefits of that until day 60, day 90. Right, so plugging that gap is absolutely critical. Alright, I'm getting confused with my thinking, sorry guys. Cool. So, what you can do when they keep leaving. Basically, we want to create a space that they don't want to leave. We want to create an environment that they love being in. We want to do everything we can, within reason, right? It's still economical, but still realistic and time appropriate, to make sure that they want to be in the place where you work. So, a really easy one is releasing the rota earlier. I don't know why it's standard for people to release a rota like a few days before the upcoming week, but people hate it. And if you think about the work-life balance, like I know when I was a manager, and it's like after a while you forget what it's like to not be given your rota until just before. But it sucks because you can't make any plans. You can't have any work-life balance. You can't have a social life. Work becomes all-consuming. It's horrible vicious cycle. It's such an easy thing. I've not really heard a good reason why that can't be done in almost every venue. You have to have trial shifts, if you have to have standby shifts, if you have to have somebody, then you say, look guys, the deal is I'll give you your rotas 2 weeks early, but everyone has to be on a standby shift once a week. They'll bite your hand off, right? So there's no reason why that shouldn't be happening really. But it's a big thing and it's free, right? It doesn't cost you a penny. Provide opportunities for progression and development. It's the number one cited reason why people leave their jobs, is because they weren't offered any progression or any development. So that can come in loads of different forms, but essentially we're talking about investing in them and showing them that there's a reason to stick around and showing them there's something worth doing on the other side of the job. What else we got? Acknowledge and reward good performance. For example, the PPP. Right, this is one of my little techniques. I love it. I'm going to share it. I'm so excited to start. So basically, what the PPP is, it's called the post-promotion pay rise. And what you say to somebody on their first day is, you've got 3 months until your probation is over. And after 3 months, I'm either going to give you a pay rise or you're fired. That is the PPP, right? And it can be cheap, right? It doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. But the point of this is it does a few things. The first thing it does is it shows the employee that they're being assessed, that they matter, and that their progress is being monitored, right? Often we just kind of dissolve into the busyness, right? And it's busy season, there's big fish to fry. And we forget about them. And they feel forgotten about and they notice, right? So get them through that bit by saying, if you do X, Y, and Z, and I have to be clear about that because I promised you a pay rise, right? If I've written down my standards and you've done them, if I've given you a training program and you followed it, then I will give you a pay rise. Who doesn't want to get a pay rise after 3 months? It's such a strong incentive and it's such a cool message to say, I got a pay rise in my first 3 months of working here, right? And for you as the owner, manager, employer, trainer, if you can't justify giving them a pay rise after 3 months, what you're essentially saying is they're not any better than they were on their first day. And if that's the case, you do need to get rid of them, right? If you can't justify that and they're not doing any better, they probably don't deserve to be working with you, right? And that means for us, we have to be accountable to our team, to the rest of the team, to our supervisors, to our bosses or managers, whatever position you're in, where you say, I had to make a call on them, and I couldn't walk past that lowered standard anymore. Everybody that's in this team has to have justified, has to be worthy of a pay rise in their first 3 months. Well, you don't get to work here because that's the kind of venue we are. It's such a powerful method, and it works, honestly, it works wonders. You can all steal it, it works wonders, right? Okay, so, next one is, oh yeah, how we did the time? I don't want to run over.
Yeah,
5 minutes,
all right.
yeah? Cool, sweet. All right, if you haven't got the time, we all are busy. Never got the time. There's always something. We were on our way to do a discovery meeting with somebody a couple of months ago. And it was big. It was with the area manager, it's an 8-site company, and it was with the brand development manager. And we got a call. Dill's on the train up from Shrewsbury, and we literally get a call saying we're going to have to cancel. Why? They've had a break-in. So, well, we have to sit in the venue, wait for the police, fill out an insurance, because there's no cavalry coming. Right? There's no one we can rely on to do this for us, to help us, to look after us. We have to stop everything we're doing. So we're all busy. We have to wear too many hats. We can't focus on working on the business because we're working in the business. It is tough. I know it's tough. So what we do is we say, don't be a victim of your own work ethic. Right? We're all taught to work really hard. It's, it's service, it's hots, it's backs, it's 200, it's 86, it's can you go and sort that guy out? Someone just spilled gravy on a newborn baby. Actually happened to me on one of my shifts. So don't be a victim of your own work ethic. Try and delegate anything you can. We've got a tool that we use, it's like just a little cheeky time diary, and you just have a little look at the end of your week, like have I spent 5 hours doing admin? Have I spent 3 hours doing replying to social media posts? Like really? Like, oh no, sorry, I keep wandering. Anything you can, try and delegate it, train it out to somebody else, delete it, repeat. Anything you find yourself taking time on, because people love getting new responsibility, people love getting things handed over to them, like genuinely, and it's a win-win, it's just a win-win. Leverage technology to work for you. If anybody here is using Excel spreadsheets to write rotas, there's basically free programs out there that'll do that, and it's such a big time saver. But use AI and tech stacks are coming on leaps and bounds at the moment, and some really cool advances. And then don't play whack-a-mole with the staff. All of these problems we've talked about today, they repeat themselves over and over and over. The mistakes and the methods are many, but the principles are very few. This is how we do it. So we literally take a vision, we tell the story, we share the vision. We go first starts with onboarding, we go talent and training, management and leadership. Just a point on this. Management and leadership, overworking management or overworking the top people in the industry, it doesn't send a good message, because if they've not got a job that you'd want, if they're working 70 hours a week for not very much money, why would anyone want to stick around in that business below them? Because all they're going to look at is a manager who's overworked. They're just looking at a job they don't want, right? So it's like there's a hidden cost to overworking people and not having a really good setup for people who at the top who love what they're doing. So it's not, again, I don't think it's optional, I think we have to do it. And then we go to brand performance. We do all the fun stuff, we do like the unique selling points, we do like what's some power of moments that we can create that create unforgettable experiences and bits of magic for guests and all that sort of stuff. All the fun stuff. All right, so I'm going to stay on time, I promise. So we started today by asking, what if 2024 could be your best year ever? And there are definitely going to be a lot of closures this year. There's going to be a lot of people who don't adapt to this new environment that we're working in, this new financial reality. But there are going to be people who do really well out of it. And those that do are going to come out the other side of this with more opportunity, with a pretty captive market, less competition than ever before. And so I want to finish on a little story about two men. I don't know why they're wearing suits, by the way. That's the best I could get ChatGPT to do. They're in the Sahara, and they come across a hungry lion. And then they both see the lion sees them, the lion runs after them, and they run up the tree. And we've got Jack and let's say Dave. Jack turns to Dave and he said, Dave, I think we should make a run for it. Dave's like, are you mad? We're not going to outrun a full-grown lion. And Jack goes, I don't have to outrun the lion. I just have to outrun you. So, yeah, we've got a massive staffing shortage. Yes, we've got a skills gap. Yes, retention rates are shit. But I don't care, and neither should you. Because you don't have to fill all those venues. You don't have to upskill the whole country, and you don't have to fix the retention rate. In other words, you just have to outrun Jack. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Oh, have I done the wrong way? No?
It's broken, so yeah.
Oh, it's making me right. Oh, there we go. Yeah, sorry. So, cheers again, buddy. Next up, we've got a wonderful bloke who has literally flown 28 hours to get back in time for this, and he may or may not be awake by the end of it. So, again, I'll keep the intro short. We've got Peter Waller-Flynn coming from Privilege HR to try and make HR interesting. Sorry,
How long did it say I've got? Thank you. Oh yeah. I'll come over here.
in the middle. Where's the laptop?
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, just click. Have a look. And make it up as you go along. You'll be fine.
Oh, you got to point it there.
There we go.
Or the other way. Or have you got a story about a lion?
No, I haven't got a story about the land. Are we able to put the laptop there by
No,
any
it's
chance?
plugged into the-
Oh, it's plugged in.
Yeah. Press one more go.
Okay, right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Waller-Flynn. I'm the co-founder of Privilege HR. As you've just been told, I have literally just landed after travelling for 28 hours. I've also got a story about Melbourne, because that's where I came from, to be with you here today. But I'll leave that for a little bit later on. But whoever's the next speaker, you need to think about Melbourne, because that's clearly the theme for today. So, sorry. We are Nationwide HR Consultancy of the Year. We were established here in Liverpool, and we work with quite a few hospitality venues in the city, in Manchester and around the country. Because I wasn't sure whether I'd be awake at this point, I just thought I'd put our history in pictures, because it's so much easier to actually talk around. So we were set up 6 years ago. There was myself and Mary Ball, who's also here with me in case I fall asleep halfway through the presentation. There was just the two of us. Now there's a team of 10 of us. We're based in Speak. But we've also got offices in Manchester, Southampton, and as you all, you can't really see it, but basically we've just incorporated the business in Australia and New Zealand as well. So I guess the message that I would like to give is, not only is it great to have family around you, and anyone who can see that far will see that that is a Bernese mountain dog. She is 48 kilos, and she was desperate to be picked up like all the rest of the family. So my poor son was carrying Milo. We have been voted Nationwide HR Consultancy of the Year. We offer 80 different services through 30 partners, and they're all locally based, and I'll come back to that in a second. We have franchised the business, and we have a number of franchisees, not only through the UK, but also now in Australia as well. Okay, so again, 200 clients. What are the 80 different services? Well, it's everything from recruitment to payroll, reward, recognition, which is what we heard a lot about from Joe, employee relations, and employment law. So we're a one-stop shop for all your workforce needs. We also support 5 local charities, and that's really, really important to us, particularly in the areas of mental health and well-being. After COVID, many people were affected by mental health, and hence why we've chosen Warrington Wolves Foundation, the Brain Charity, the ADHD Foundation, and a couple of other charities who are doing amazing work in our local community. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? You're all okay? So sorry, there's just a summary of the workforce services, and again, that was probably just to remind me rather than anyone else of what it was that we did. So, what does HR do? And Gareth very kindly said, make HR interesting. Well, you know what HR is, what HR is. How many of you have either employed the services of someone who's in HR or outsourced HR services? Do you want to just put your hands up? So yeah, got 3 or 4, 5. Okie dokie. Well, given there's about 50 of us and we've only got 5 hands up, and yet what you've heard from Joe and what you probably all know is actually most of the challenges that we've got in hospitality today are around our people. And yet only 10% of us engage in HR services. So I guess what I thought I would do is maybe just give you a typical day in the week of here's some of the things that we actually work on and work with our clients on to help them grow their business, okay? Because the one, our main vision, is to actually grow your business through your people, okay? Grow your business through your people. And that's more important than ever in hospitality. So, and this is literally just a few things that we've plucked out of a very busy week. So we rolled out an appraisal system to a team of 149. Okay? How many of you have got appraisal systems or some kind of performance management system? We've got 1, 2, 2.5. 2.5. Okay. Appraisal systems aren't just about a form that you fill out once a year and write down what the person's objectives are and if you can remember them, how they've done against them, okay? An appraisal system is something that you should be living and breathing. It's about saying to someone from the minute they arrive, this is what your job is. This is why we're excited to have you. And this is how you're going to live the vision and the values, which are then going to drive the performance of this business. And that needs to be reviewed on a daily, weekly, monthly, or regular basis. This is not about once a year, let's sit down for 10 minutes while we're having a coffee and we'll talk about how bad you are, okay? It's not, because that is the reality of what most people think an appraisal system is. Performance management is about setting the tasks, making sure that you onboard that person so they know very clearly not only how to do it, but the way in which to do it. Because as Joe said, I know the Hawks Moors, the other hospitality businesses which are well known, are known because they do something differently. They add value to the experience that the client enjoys. And you need to be able to work out what is that for you, and then you need to train that into your staff through the performance management process. We talked about probation earlier. That's always very interesting from a legal perspective in terms of, yes, most people have a 3-month probationary period. However, you've got the facility of up to 12 months to extend somebody's probation. So somebody might not get it in the first 3 months, and there might be all sorts of reasons why. And I guess what we have to do is look at why that is. Because it's not necessarily about the person themselves, it could be the system, the process or the development program that they've been put through. So we need to have a little look at why that is, and my one top tip for you, if it isn't working out in the first 3 months and you don't want to sack them, why not extend their probation? Why not look at giving them, 6 months or 9 months in which to be able to clearly see whether they can meet those standards? Now, if they're really far off and they've got no hope in hell's chance of actually achieving them, then by all means let them go. But you know what, if they're not far off and you think, you know what, this person is developable, and you know what, sometimes there's a range of circumstances that might happen to someone in their life, which means they haven't been able to do it within that 3-month period, then as employers, extend their probation, okay? Do not let that time just pass, because if you do and you haven't told them you're extending their probation, then they've passed their probation, okay? So it's really, really important. If you've got a 3-month probation, you need to see them 1 week before the end of that 3 months. We can do an awful lot on performance management, but that's probably about a half-a-day program. I guess all I'm trying to say here is have a very clear idea of what the objectives are, what the standards are, and make sure that you and your management or supervision team work hard in conjunction with that employee. Because as Joe said, it's nearly cost £10,000 to train them. So why the heck wouldn't you invest some time in making sure that they know what they're doing and they feel supported through the process? A grievance investigation, and this was sexual harassment. Sexual harassment unfortunately happens an awful lot in the hospitality sector, and it's something that you guys need to be very, very clear about having a policy, having procedures, having standards which are acceptable and not acceptable, not only amongst your employees, but also in terms of clients as well. And there is some law that is coming in April, which you all need to be aware of, which I'll talk about later. This particular case was actually sexual harassment against a man by a director. So it's important, if something like that happens, just because the director is the owner of the business, you need to deal with it properly. And if you do not know how to deal with it, then you need to engage the services of either someone in HR or someone legally, or maybe a business coach who's got experience of having dealt with this. But when it comes to sexual harassment, there's a very big liability, so make sure that you get the advice that you need. Subject access requests. We're getting an awful lot of these. How many of you have ever had a subject access request? None? Okay, you're really lucky. This is where an employee who's not very happy maybe is about to start the disciplinary process, and they say, oh, I'm going to put in a subject access request. That basically means that any emails, any texts, or any conversations that you've had about that individual concerning a specific matter, actually they can request copies of that. So I guess the learning here for you guys as employers and as owners, if you're going to write something about someone, please do not do it by email. Yes, you can have conversations. We have to have conversations. It's part of life. But if you're going to say something bad about someone, please don't put it in an email, because it will be subject to a search and could be admissible in court. Occupational health referrals. We're seeing a lot more of these within the hospitality sector. People who are going off sick for long periods of time, and quite often clients, new clients will come to us and say, oh, we've got someone who's off sick, and then you'll say, how long have they been off sick? Oh, 6 months. Well, why didn't you do something after 1 month? Oh, well, we didn't know what to do. Okay. What I would say is, again, I know there is an awful lot of different policies, processes and practices which will encourage, help, support your employee back to work. If somebody's off for more than 3 weeks, then you need to do something about it. Do not let it just roll, do not just leave it. So there are occupational health clinicians who can come and give you expert advice. Similarly, there's processes which will ensure that the person's given the support that they're needed within the workplace, and HR can help you with that. But there's also the fact that that person has signed a contract to come and do work for your organisation. And if they can't do it regularly, it doesn't really matter what the reason is, and there are certain reasons that we have to take into account, but ultimately they're not fulfilling their contract. And I guess at that point, that's where we need our HR advisors, our lawyers, to really look at, have they breached contract? So again, it's how do you get that lovely balance of support versus the fact that if the person's not there, you're putting other members of the team under pressure. And by putting other people under pressure, then they're potentially going to go off sick as well. So you do have a duty as an employer through vicarious liability to make sure you do something about that employee who's sick. There's a whole host of things that you can do, and that's a 2-day program. But it just gives you a flavour of, don't just sit there ignoring it. Please, 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 once they're off for 3 weeks, do something about it. Reviewed, redrafted client contracts, policies and handbooks. So some of you may have found policies and handbooks off the web. Some of you might have got it from FSB, the Chamber. That's good, that's great, at least you've got something. But from April last year, it is now a legal requirement that all your employees have what we call a contract. It's a statement of terms and particulars. Every single one needs to have a contract. So 1, make sure you've got that. 2, have at least the main policies. If you haven't got a handbook, it doesn't matter, but you need some specific policies. And again, you can find them online, or you can come to a HR company, but do have them. Similarly, the laws change every year. So if you've got a handbook from 10 years ago, then please do make sure that you've updated it. Because from April, as you'll see very shortly, there's a lot of laws that are changing. Okay. Dismissal of an underperforming employee. How many people have dismissed employees for underperformance? 3, 4, okay. Right, a few more hands have gone up this time. Again, there's a process that you need to go through. You know what? Dismissing someone for underperformance should really be a last resort, because as we've heard all the way through, and it's exactly the same in Australia, we've got a huge labour shortage. So if you've taken the time to interview a whole load of candidates, or 2 candidates, and you've invested the time in onboarding them, then let's see what we can do to help and support those employees. They're really, really valuable. But ultimately, there are times, unfortunately, when the person isn't the right fit, or the person cannot do what they said they were able to do, or there could be a whole host of other reasons. And then the final one is implementing a wellbeing and mental health support in the workplace. So again, under your health and safety requirements, you do need to have a strategy for keeping your people well. If you've got people who are going off either short-term or long-term sick, and they are quoting stress, then again, under the HSE laws, you need to make sure that you have got policies, procedures, and a strategy for ensuring that your people remain well in the workplace. And this is going to come to the fore more and more as those neuropsychological issues are being better diagnosed, better understood, particularly the likes of autism and ADHD, you do have a requirement under law, under the Equality Act, to make reasonable adjustments. Okay? But I think the big thing I would say here is, rather than wait until things go wrong and someone goes off long-term sick, please, please, please do that due diligence. Do that audit of how well are your people, and then hopefully that will save you lots of absence and any future liability as well. So we've got some employment law changes in 2024, quite a few actually. So if you want to take a copy of this slide, by all means do. But similarly, Gareth has got our details, and we can send you a short newsletter which outlines some of them. I think the main ones for hospitality are obviously the living wage has gone up, which will have a big impact not only on how much you're spending on your salary bill, but as Joe alluded to, the differential that you'll now have between your lowest paid and then your first managerial ring is actually much, much lower, and what it's causing is a lot of salary creep. Now, for many business, this is just unaffordable just to give everyone a £1 increase. So what they are doing is looking at how they might restructure, because they have to pay that minimum wage. So there's no getting away from that. But what they are looking at is, do they need as many supervisors? Do they need as many managers? So I know there are alternatives to reducing your overall pay bill, but the one thing that we're finding is people who are supervisors are saying, we don't want to be a supervisor anymore. For the sake of 25, 50 pence an hour more, why would we put ourselves through all the hassle? And that's the question you've got to ask yourselves, is why would they put themselves through the hassle? So we either need to give them more money, or we need to relook at how they actually supervise. Pay changes for part-time and irregular hour workers. Who has part-timers or 0-hour contracts? Yeah? Okay, it's a nightmare trying to work out the Lincoln holidays, and you need more than Excel, more than Breathe HR. It's going to be simplified, okay? So it's 12.09% on top of the basic. That will be so much easier and will save your payroll departments a lot of time. Have any of you ever merged with another company? Ever gone through TUPE? No? Okay, I've got one person. The TUPE regulations are changing, and Andrea, I'll go through that with you separately, because that's quite a big piece of law that's changing. Finally, we're getting a lot more legislation on carers. Okay, so people can have up to a week off, unpaid, for all sorts of different carers leave. And similarly, we're going to have something from April, which is miscarriage leave. The number of instances of miscarriage are actually a lot higher than many people would imagine. And up till now, people were expected to either be unpaid and sick, but most people were expected to come back to work as soon as possible. And there was nothing in legislation. Yes, sir?
So I was just going to ask, is that for the carrier or both carriers?
So currently it's for the carrier. However, this is already being questioned, because in the same way as we have maternity, paternity, and a whole raft of equality legislation, this one is already being questioned in terms of why wouldn't both partners actually have access to the miscarriage leave. But for the minute it is the carrier.
Just to be clear, that's unpaid as well. You guys are paid.
Yeah, it's unpaid. However, again, I think the government has been put under a lot of pressure. We've got a general election, so there is a few who actually should be paid, and even if it's just the statutory amount, which I know isn't a lot of money, it's just that recognition that actually someone deserves to be paid. But you know what, the reality is if someone's had a miscarriage, hopefully the GP would sign them off and they would get SSP. So the law has taken an awful long time to actually get to where it is now, but I guess what it's showing is a step in the right direction. A very small step, I might add. Ability to request flexible working from day one. Have any of you ever dealt with a flexible working request? You're all so lucky, aren't you? God, you've got the perfect employee. I guess people do have different childcare requirements, but similarly, your older workforce have to look after parents, or they may have someone else that they're looking after who's a dependent. And rather than waiting 26 weeks, employees can now actually request flexible working from day one. Sexual harassment, or the protection from sexual harassment. A lot of, sorry about that, have come a long way, very tired. I guess as employers, you all need a policy on protecting your employees from sexual harassment. You need to have a training program or some kind of online training which demonstrates clearly to anyone who whistleblows to HSE that you've done everything reasonable to protect your workers from sexual harassment. Now, the reason why this is so important is the employee doesn't have to be the victim of sexual harassment. If they do not believe that you're taking the necessary steps to make people aware about what is acceptable and what isn't, then they can whistleblow to HSE. So this is a really important piece of legislation that you need to get to grips with. You need to have a policy, you need to have training programs. Just before we go to the general election, I think I might only have a couple of minutes left maybe. There's also from April, you will no longer be able to take tips from your employees. So I won't ask for a show of hands because I don't want to embarrass anybody. I'm sure you all give your employees all of their tips. But from April, it's a legal requirement to do so. So those organisations and those restaurant chains that used to take all of the money and then they'd give 50% to their employees and claim the other 50% was an administrative charge, that is now unlawful. Okay, so again, just have a little think about, in practice, how are you going to give those tips out? Okay. And then finally, we've got the general election. So depending on whether you're Labour or Conservative, I guess, that there'll be differences. I think if it's Labour, there'll be more of a focus on immigration, allowing employees from the European Union in particular to be able to come in much easier. That seems to be the focus. Okay. I guess if you're Conservative, sorry, you know what? I've got it the wrong way around, haven't I? Conservatives are about immigration. They've reckoned there's a shortage of labour. They've recognised that, and at the end of the day, they are going to look at bringing how we can bring people into the country in different ways than currently apply, but particularly European workers. Labour are looking at 0 hours, and they want that banned. They believe it's unlawful. And similarly, they also object to fire and rehire. So fire and rehire is where you want to change the terms and conditions of a worker, and you give them the appropriate notice period. You give them notice that they either accept the new terms and conditions, or you will basically dismiss them, and they will then either leave or they'll be rehired on the new terms and conditions. So it's called fire and rehire. It's used quite a lot when companies merge, or in hospitality where maybe the salary bill is just getting too high, maybe the very generous terms and conditions that were offered at the very beginning suddenly are no longer affordable. So I know companies will do this fire and rehire, and what Labour are saying is that's not acceptable, and that'll be one of the first things that they change. Right, in the 2 or 3 minutes that are left, have you got any questions that you would like to
We'll
ask?
do a Q&A at the end.
Oh, we're doing a Q&A?
Yeah, don't worry.
Even better. Thank you. That gives me time to have a Red Bull, wake up again, and yeah, I'll answer any questions later. Thank you.
So Louise already told me that I should have mentioned it before Peter started, that there is a Q&A panel at the end. I don't know if everybody else was the same as me, but when Peter was saying it's a legal requirement for ... anybody else kind of went, shit. I don't really want to put my hand up anymore.
I stopped asking at that point.
Oh no, that was for the best, mate. I think I should walk out the door at this point. So, what I should have said half an hour ago, there will be a Q&A session at the end. But next up, we've got Louise is going to have a little, chat with Ian. Ian Hoskins is the founder of Marboyles, Tempest and Nova Scotia. And most of you might remember him from Mar Edgerton's before that, which I didn't know until I started working with him, being completely honest. So Ian works for himself. He's the only guy involved, sole director shareholder. So we're going to speak a little bit about what it means to be an operator whilst you're running everything yourself, and then how important it is to utilise the team in the best way possible to get exactly where Ian's got over the past kind of decade. So without further ado.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you don't normally have a problem hearing me, to be honest. You can hear me from the other side of the room. So those of you who don't know me, my name is Louise Kissack. If you do know me, you probably know me as either Spaghetti Group or Liverpool Food Network. However, I also actually do work in collaboration with Gareth quite a lot on events like this, because I just think that what Gareth does in bringing people together for certain events, whether that's finance-led or like today's HR-led, is just really important if you're in hospitality. And it's actually through Gareth that I've met Ian. And I'm going to ask Ian a few questions today about how he got to where he is. Now, you said the theme today is Melbourne. It's not. I'm born and bred in Brisbane. So, you know, I think we'll just say Australia generally for today, you know? Commonwealth. So yeah, Ian, any connection to Melbourne, Australia?
My sister lives in Sydney.
Well, there we go.
So yeah.
It's like we planned it. So Ian, if you could just tell us a little bit how you got to where you are. So those who don't know, the 3 pubs that Ian currently operates, Marboyles, Nova Scotia and Tempest, brilliant bars, very different. So this is not a cut and paste exercise, they're quite different venues. How did you get to where you are now?
I think it's without a plan, really. I mean, it was opportunity and loving what you do. It wasn't that, right, I'm going to roll this out into something that could be 70 sites, but I wanted to make it work for me and what I enjoyed to do as well. So there was never any big plan, really. 12 years ago, I was working for a branded chain as their acquisitions manager and also marketing director, so I was under pressure to find them sites. Sometimes it would be, you'd have to bring 20 to a board meeting that they could just discount whether they wanted them or not. And there was one which definitely wasn't a model that they would have been interested in. It was a Thai pub, and it was closed. Pretty much it was kind of out for the count, but It was right near Lime Street Station. It was behind the Empire Theatre. O2 Academy was around the corner, St George's Hall. I just couldn't understand how nobody could make money out of it. It just seemed it was, you know, all the little tick boxes of location and everything else, and had this amazing history as well. So, yeah, I rolled the dice on it really. I just thought I could make a difference to that. It was a theatre pub and had this amazing history of people like Charlie Chaplin and Marilyn Monroe to Annie Lennox and Kate Bush, and right across the last 100 years it had been in there. So I knew from my background that was in marketing, I could kind of use that as something which I could kind of, basically people had kind of forgotten that. So from my perspective, I wanted, I guess it was a challenge I suppose. I also wanted to leave my job, and I did want to have a sort of a side hustle, which I think that was mistake number one. It's like hospitality is never a side hustle. The fact it was that extreme. I was still doing my day job. The only way I could finance it was max out credit cards, loans, whatever I possibly could do, beg, borrowed and steal. Rented my flat out, moved it above, which was not even habitable. I was like sticking the dump living upstairs, and it was literally 24 hours a day. I'd go and do my day job, try and field calls, you know, the barmaid called me telling me the trainer hadn't turned up and this had broken, and the urinals were overflowing. I was trying to sort of do all that kind of while trying to maintain full 100% work in my job, get home, do the night shift there. Sometimes, again, just where it was, you'd have cast and crew that would come in after the show, they'd want to stay late. You know, you'd be there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on your laptop trying to use your time productively, you know, trying to move them on and get rid of them and stuff. So from that perspective, it was really hard work, and you do it because you love it, and you do it because you're whatever makes you fall in love with that place, that kind of carries you through, I'd say, at least the first sort of 18 months. I'd say maybe about a year into that, you start thinking, this can't go on, you know. So living above a premises and working it really was 7 days a week, 18, 19 hours a day. So that was my first one, and then really it was accidental. Mar Boyles was, everyone always thought they were linked before, 2 bars in Liverpool that were called Mar. We always used to get their debt collection letters and people turning up wanting money for them and stuff, but that's really how I'd heard of it, and how I sort of saw the opportunity there, and that was a similar circumstance. And sort of going right back to what we were kind of saying at the beginning, really about kind of teams and stuff. Really, back in the early days, it was just me and my friends that were kind of running it. We did have a 2-piece situation with 3 members of staff, and that was a little bit kind of odd, the whole thing where we had people that, you know, these were middle-aged barmaids that had been there for 25 years, didn't really understand how to be a manager to them. Kind of, it's a bit weird sometimes being a manager to people that were 20, 30 years older than you and in very fixed ways, and they knew everything better than you did, and you had to run the place and this, that and the other. But you find a way. But the advice that I got at the time was do not hire friends or family. And I didn't really know any other way, because I was flying by the seat of my pants, and if I did hire people and had to come up with all this stuff that we talked about before, I just knew I'd be setting myself up for failure. So I tried to basically hire people that I thought could do the job and could do it well, but also have my back as well. And that was kind of really important. But I think probably in retrospect, I think the not hiring friends or family would have been the better way to go, put that work in first. But ultimately, as your business grows, you've got to grow with it, and if you start hiring friends and family, you're going to run out of them eventually, and you're going to have to start doing things properly. So, yeah.
It's interesting what you say, because I think there's a few people in this room who've started hospitality businesses as a side hustle / accidentally, that have become, Carly's nodding there, Carly's like, yeah, this happened to me in COVID. I started making food and now I own a business and I don't know how it happened. But, you know, that love of it, you're right, you kind of fall in love with a very different role, and it is a lifestyle choice as well, I think.
But also, it does become about you, and you've got to kind of find some way of separating that and finding that what you put into it yourself, what is definable, and what you then have got to say, right, well, I can't be there all the time, and that was part of the problem. You're pretty much working all the shifts there. If you weren't there, stuff would go wrong. And I think with the second place, normally people tend to kind of set the first place up and then move on to the second. I did it slightly differently, just due to the fact that there wasn't accommodation above Marboyle, so I didn't feel like someone had to live on the premises for that. So I did it very differently, and I hired people that could make that bar run independently of me. So it was a very different relationship actually, and that in the end was why I sold the first business a couple of years later after that, when Marboyle's was established. I'd opened a bar in Manchester at that point at the time as well, and the two new ones, I knew the relationship I wanted to have with them, and it wasn't like the first one. So it was very, very different, and again, that had its own challenges. Again, because you're not there all the time, we had a completely different till system, and I think even up to 3 years afterwards, if I was there and someone asked me to make them a coffee, didn't have the coffee machine work, couldn't work the tills. So, but then in the original place, I knew every single element of that business. So again, these were businesses that I guess had a similar function. It wasn't a cut and paste job. It wasn't a chain. I like to think they had a sort of a set of elements there that were definable, but they were completely unique to that location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that you kind of saw from the second site immediately that you couldn't duplicate yourself. You couldn't do all of the micromanagement that you were doing in venue number one. But you're right, a lot of people do take themselves out to set up number two, and then the first site starts to kind of sales drop off a bit, or you start getting a couple of bad TripAdvisor reviews and you think, oh, I need to go. And then you're kind of stuck in that limbo between site one and two because you're trying to be all things to both sites. But for you to recognise so quickly that site number two needed to be, self-sustaining very quickly.
And
how
a bit
did
of
you
a
set that
distance
up?
as well.
Yeah.
Keep your distance with it. Well, I'd like to say that definitely worked. It kind of almost worked, but in the opposite way. So we had a great first month there. We opened like literally the weekend when the 3 Queen ships came in, so it was completely crazy. First month or two was great, and all of a sudden, then 1 week the sales were really bad, and then it was the second week, third week, and then so I felt that I really had to go back to the floor there a little bit with that. So I was like, this is ridiculous. We've gone down to like $6 grand a week, and this is completely unsustainable. So I had to really then, again, not really an absolute textbook kind of example, but I thought really I needed to give that more of my time, because I was constantly still drawn to the first business because I just couldn't find a way to take myself out of that first business. So in the end, when it came down to it, I knew I had to sell it because, again, it was just a unique set of skills that I didn't think I could find with just employing someone to run it that way.
Was it a bit like selling your firstborn child though? Were you emotionally attached?
So yes, definitely, and that's why I knew I had to sell it really, because ultimately the stress of running that business and that little pull, a bit like you say with a child, is that I knew that I could never relax, knowing that all the stuff was going on there. It was feast or famine. There might have been an award ceremony at the Liner Hotel you know about. You're absolutely chocker. Something comes in off the trains. You're completely busy, trying to find that kind of medium ground to staff it well and to make sure that it wasn't overwhelmed was really, really difficult. But yeah, I think that when you look back, there's definitely things that you could have done differently. Would you do the same things again? Probably not, but you're never going to know that as operators. You can only just basically put your best foot forward and try and learn by your own mistakes, but look at other people as well and just see, I was very fortunate. I had a lot of people around me that had done stuff like that before, and ultimately you can choose to go with it or go completely against it. And to be honest, I've come from a background where there was a policy and a rule for everything, a huge, great big Bible for anything you possibly could do. And ultimately, I felt from a staffing point of view, it was just there to catch people out all the time. It was a way to be able to sack somebody. It felt very, very negative to me. So probably wasn't the best idea, but I just basically hired people and just basically, I was there all day long, so I'd tell them what I'd want, and I'd hope that kind of my values and standards would be replicated. It doesn't always work out that way. Again, that's about hiring the right people, but that then becomes more and more difficult. You can't just keep doing that all the time. You've got to find a way to be able to put everything that you think makes your business unique into some sort of policy and procedure and strategy that staff can come buy into.
I think when you get into that stage where you are looking at growth,
Yeah.
and I think Joe touched on this in the first presentation, but you do have to have some kind of standards in place. So everybody is trying to play by the same rule book. But I think when you're recruiting a team as well, particularly if you're recruiting, so you've gone on then from you sold Mar Edgerton's, you're at Marboyles, you've gone on then to open Tempest next.
Yeah, so sort of COVID was in the middle there. I had a bar in Manchester, which again, having a bar in a different city, that was a completely different set of challenges. Not only in the staffing, again, I'd lived in Manchester for years as well, so I thought that actually it was, for me, I kind of knew people, there were people I could call upon and things like that. In the end, that didn't really go very far. We recruited sort of fresh, and again, that thing about if you're a owner-operator and you're all over the business, trying to split yourself, again, not just between two locations, two cities. I always felt that every time I went to Manchester, I was always on the back foot. I'd always miss something, or I wasn't there when something happened. Really, that site had to run autonomously, but it kind of didn't, and I felt the problems that we did have with that site. I mean, it was a great success, but ultimately, it took us a while to get there, and I think probably, when I look back, I probably didn't give the best of what I should have done to my staff there. I think also that was 2016 to about 2020. I think I was lucky. I mean, chefs were always a problem to recruit there. I was very lucky that sort of I had two decent managers that had a lot of friends, a lot of knowledge in Manchester, and we traded well because of that. And I think had that situation been slightly different, we would have really, really found it hard. So in a sense, when COVID happened and you look at everything on the table and, you know, have we got businesses, will people come back into the cities? To me, it was an easy choice to let that one go and to go, right, actually what I do want to concentrate on is stuff on my doorstep that I know I know I'm the type of person that needs to be all over things from a detail perspective, but I know I can't do that when I've got sites scattered around all over the country. So I kind of looked at a different model, which seems to be quite popular in Liverpool. You see a lot of operators that basically start kind of buying up the street. So I pretty much thought, well, actually, we know the business district well, we know the tourism and the docks area well. Let me just look at this one specific area and look at actually a collection of sites that maybe were independents that all have a kind of a common theme in terms of service standards, maybe the demographic in a small way as well. And that to me seemed a better business model just from my perspective. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be something that's going to be for the next 10, 15 years. I don't know whether I'll open another 5 bars or 1 bar or none at all. For me, it is all about opportunity and workload, finding a way to be able to sort of balance your own life goals with your business, and you get to a time in your life where you're like, well, have I got the hunger to open up the site? Have I got the hunger to continue with it? And you know, as we've all said today, it's very, very challenging times. So I think, kind of going forward, you know, maybe even with the 3 existing sites, so there's definitely much more that we can get out of them. And in terms of staffing and looking at the teams that we've got there, we have to be confident in that basically any new sites aren't going to affect the stability of the 3 that we've currently got, because times are very, very tough, margins are tight, and taking on anything else, the team's going to be absolutely integral. And just sort of learning really from what I've done with the other 3, if I was to open a 4th, I think probably now is sort of pause for reflection. The most recent one we opened, Nova Scotia, that was done, we were really, really close to the summer, didn't have the sort of luxury of, okay, let's bring the staff in for 2 weeks and train them before we open. It was literally the paint was still wet on the walls, I was still doing stuff. We used some of the staff from other sites, but again, it was really hard to train them because the 2 sites were busy. we weren't even really sure what type of service we were going to offer, whether it would all be table service or part, and would that change if it was busy outside. So it was by the skin of our teeth that we sort of opened, and service was a mess for weeks and weeks and weeks. We didn't really know. I was like, why is this so difficult? We just can't find that way of being able to serve people properly, or all of a sudden if 10 people walked through the door, everything would fall apart. And I think that really goes back to the fundamental where you can sort of basically do it by the skin of your teeth sometimes, and sometimes you've got to sit down and go, right, we do have to do this properly. We do have to work out what's our service plan. This is a bigger site now. Doing it in the little backstreet pub is completely different. We've got to sit down, we've got to work this through seriously. So that's one thing I've definitely felt, that as your sites get bigger, as your locations get better, you've got to get better with it as well. You really have. You've got to sort of step up and go, right, well, we can't do what we always did before. We really have to improve things here.
I think one of the most interesting things that Ian said to me when we first talked about kind of teams and people was that, so I don't think you've mentioned this yet actually, but Ian's got quite an interesting background in theatre and performance and arts. And I said, well, would you hire for personality or would you hire for experience? And this is always a question that comes up when we're talking about recruitment: personality over experience, or what balance of the two. And Ian actually said to me, I think hiring a team is like casting a play. And I thought, well, that makes so much sense to me. But can you elaborate on that a little bit, just because it's one of the things that really stuck with me?
Well, it was quite literal actually for the first place, because I had the idea that would have been a theatre pub would hire lots of resting actors, and some of them were quite well known, and it would be this sort of thing where you'd come in and go, you weren't sure who was behind the bar, or recognise that person off the telly, or Margie Clark was doing the pub quiz, and then Tina Malone was doing that, and then sometimes they'd jump behind the bar. And that was sort of like its thing really, that's what we wanted to do. But with the other bar staff, that's what I kind of look for really. And it probably doesn't sound PC at all in this sort of day and age, but I was like, what is the best pub that you can kind of imagine? Well, there's personality behind the bar, of course, You've got the older gents at the bar that kind of, prop up the bar for most of the day. What do they want? You kind of look back at the sort of old Coronation Street episodes, and you see kind of, the great personalities that are there. And that to me was the business. It was the person. It was, it was the place. That was something which was really important. And I kind of carried that through, really, where you go, okay, well, you can call it sort of casting a play, but that's based on skills. What do you need here? And even when I'm recruiting now for management positions, and I always sort of say, well, you can say it about football as well, you want your best team that's in there that covers all those kind of bases, so you really want somebody from the management team that knows what they're doing with a cellar, or someone that's come from a public background with that. We do lots of private events, so you want someone that's come from kind of conferencing and that level of standard that's really, really important with hotels that maybe sometimes you don't get in high volume operations. So that was something which I was like, you all need to learn off each other. You put those skills together and you can do something that's just really, really, really great, because everybody has got their A game and you can really learn from that other person. I've not worked in a coffee shop, but you have, so you know exactly the soft touches that are needed during the daytimes, to encourage that business. But I've worked behind the bar, high volume, so but you might fall apart because you just not, you get scared that the bar's full deep. So that's what I called it when I was sort of saying you're casting a play, because you want all those elements in place. You want all those characters, and it's hospitality. It's about personality, and it's about people. And I think of all the industries that we've got now, really we're the only people that are really still employing people. Even retail, you go in most shops these days, and half of it is self-service, and even the half that isn't self-service, they're just stood around watching you scan. So it's one, so it's one of them things where I can't think of anywhere else now where training and hiring the right people is so important. I mean, they really are your front line to your business. And one thing which I'll always say, and I don't really know how I got that right, but out of anything that someone's kind of repeated what people have kind of told me, is not like, oh, you know, you designed the bar beautifully, or with the most amazing cocktail, was your staff are brilliant, your staff are lovely. And that was one thing which I was like, well, so I've done it once with one bar, how can I repeat that for a second or a third? And I didn't really know how I did it, but again, it just comes back to that thing where I said, well, anyone that I meet, first of all, I want them to be a nice person and respectful, and also whether they come in and do a 6-hour shift or they're there for 40 hours, they need to sort of buy into your ethos of the business. And that's not giving them a phone book sized kind of mission statement. I think it's actually kind of action and doing. And for me, I always just felt that from the early days when I was working behind the bar 18 hours a day, if a customer walked through the door, for me, that was like, right, that's 20 quid that goes towards paying the lecky or paying the rent or paying the beer bill. I'd want to throw pebbles on the floor for them. And you know, often you do lose sight of the fact that customers are paying your wages, that guests are the ones that are keeping these businesses going. They're not just people coming through the you've got to serve and they're asking for this. So it's trying to sort of find that way of being able to make that your culture, really. But I think you can be lucky with that, but also I also think that if you just started that with 2 or 3 members of the team, it'll be like a ripple effect. It will absolutely kind of, and we've often found you might hire somebody that doesn't quite work out. Even if they're sort of on the fence, they'll either go one way or the other. They'll either join the team and they'll go, right, we get it. You know, we've got to go this bit further. This is how we speak to people. This is how we deal with people. This is how we sort of just go that extra mile. Or they'll just come in and do their shift, and gradually, either they'll leave or their shifts will start to decline, and other people will end up starting to replace them. So, yeah, it is kind of like casting a play, because you want the right. It's a team. It's a team, basically.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I'm going to leave Ian here, and I'm going to ask Joe and Peter to come and join Ian, and Gareth is going to host a bit of a Q&A panel. So if anybody does have questions, now is your time, and there are a couple of questions I think that have come up through the presentations that we've done as well. So Gareth, I'm going to hand over to you.
Danny boy. This is as far as you got when I stood next to you 45 minutes ago. It's okay, she won't hit me while the camera's on. Am I in frame as well?
I shall just check.
That's the important
Yes,
thing.
you are.
There we go.
Wonderful.
Sorry. To be fair, a lot of this is now going to be thrown at you, Peter. Yeah. So when you were talking before, I walked over and stood next to Ian and went, "Did you know that half of this was like legally required?" No. So I think the biggest question for me, especially because I run a small team, is how do you keep up with the constant changes in legislation? I know the answer, I think I know the answer, because I know the answer on my side, because that's up to me to know it to tell a client. But for smaller businesses where outsourced HR isn't always an option, how do you know?
Okay, you know what? So employment law generally changes in April, and that was always really nice and easy. I know about February, March, go onto social media and there'll be a raft of different employment lawyers or HR people telling you what the changes are. I think this year is slightly different in that we've got laws which are changing April, June, October, and some of those changes we haven't even got a date yet. And I think when you have a general election, this is quite common. So my advice to anyone who maybe hasn't got access to HR is do use social media. If you are the member of a chamber, or if you belong to a hospitality group.
VII is good actually. They've got the British Institute of Innkeepers.
Okay. So anything like that, or even if you're at a networking event like this, I know, use the opportunity to collaborate, to say to each other, hey, I know what laws are changing, because there will be probably some major changes every single quarter. Or you can put yourself on the mail list, and with your permission, we'll be very happy to send you out updates. How does that sound? Anything else you guys have come up with?
Yeah, I mean, the BII, I think that's a really invaluable resource actually. It's kind of a little kind of old school when you were kind of, I think, if you used to have to get a license, I think that was kind of, you were pretty much forced, I mean, to do that. I worked for it was a Tide pub, so they didn't insist that you were a member, but there was a really good, I mean, it's definitely improved. Back in the day, we used to send out sort of paper updates and stuff, but they send out a newsletter once a week which has got everything in there. They've got a portal where you can go in and basically employment law, even just down to suppliers and things like that, and preferred rates with insurance companies and whatnot. So that's good, but I always used them. They had a helpline there for employment law or any changes, or you could kind of call up if you've got an issue with an employee and you just need a second opinion on something. So I think as a starting point, if you are a licensed premises, that's a good, I mean, I think it's like $150 a year, but I know I've saved that like 10 times over that year from advice that they've got and savings that I've made with insurance and stuff.
Unfortunately, I don't have a partnership with them, so I don't get any money for that. I suppose the next one is more focused towards Ian and Joe. Is if your budget's limited, which it is in hospitality, doesn't matter your size, it's fucking limited. Quick wins in terms of either engaging with teams or investing in them.
I would definitely say start off by writing your own manual first. You know, it's your business, this should be your responsibility to write it. Obviously when it goes into kind of legal areas, then obviously look for kind of advice for that, but ultimately from training, you know, rather than just get something off the shelf, which really people don't buy into. I mean, I think I probably left it way longer than I should have done, but ultimately once we did start to write our own training programs, it actually focuses the senior management team into kind of asking those fundamental questions of what we're doing and why and what we're going to give people and, you know, how we appraise people and things like that. But I think start with, I mean, it's your kind of USP, that is your definable thing of, you know, this is about service. Is it just about speed, or is it about that, you know, you give people more? And I think, you know, just to expect, you know, staff that you're hiring on minimum wage to just get that straight away, particularly if independent, is quite hard. And you just think you set yourself up for expectations that they will always underperform. So I'd say, you know, there's a time element to that, but it is free and it's a starting point. And then you know, once you are a little bit bigger or there's more cash in the bank, you can then go to kind of, you know, these guys and stuff and say, listen, this is what we're doing at the moment. Is this good enough? You know, maybe there's alterations that need to be made, but ultimately this is what we're about. And obviously, you know, the likes of you guys can kind of sense check that and then take that to the next level. So I mean, that's free. It just takes your time and so.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, well, you saw in our model there, like our very first step with any client is to give voice to the vision piece. We learned that the hard way, by the way. We were in doing training for a couple of days. One of the elements was guest recovery. And we'd been face to face with a team of 20, 30, and the venue had been shut. And we knew what we thought good guest recovery was. And at the end of the training, the client went, "Why have you taught them to do that?" And we're like, "Well, that's what we showed. We showed you what we were planning to do. Like we okayed it." So no, I don't want to do them like that. I want you to teach them this way. It's like we were so motivated to know your standard. We were being paid to come in and learn your process, and we didn't get it. So when we didn't pick up on those subtle hints there. What chances your team got? What chances a non-motivated or mediumly motivated, let's say, new staff member, young staff member, inexperienced staff member got And that's just one element of your service, that's one element of your brand. And yeah, to echo Paul, it's like, it's about, sorry Ian, sorry Paul. To echo Ian, it's really about like, what can you do that's free? It's like, be clear about your why, like be clear about what you're doing in business, and that will attract so many people, and it'll resonate with your guests, it'll resonate with your teams, like, and yeah, it doesn't cost anything but time. But it's a crucial first step. So be really clear about what you're doing and why.
Yeah. So you're always working with their training scheme that's already in place, or is it somewhere you've got to go back to basics and go right?
Yeah, either or.
Yeah.
So all those elements we can, if they've already got an onboarding program, we don't touch it.
Yeah.
We don't need to do it. If it's already there, it works, great. We might just update it with like the mission or whatever. But the whole idea of starting with that give voice to the vision is so that we can act as if the owner is there. You know, and then the idea is if that could be passed on, that then system can be absorbed by the team, and then you've got an insulated business because you've got everybody singing off the same hymn sheet from, you know, for everything that we do. It's a standpoint of this is what the business is for, this is what we're trying to achieve, and here's what's cool about it, right?
And there's occasions then when you go in there is nothing, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's scary,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, I was operational in hospitality for 12 years, 13 years, maybe longer. And yeah, I only think I ever saw one formalised training program. I think I only saw one brand manual. I think I only saw, because I always worked in independence, and the ball got dropped because it's not a priority. That's the thing, is it's if you've got 2 hours spare to do something today, you're going to do the thing that's going to give you an immediate reward, right? Or you're going to cover a shift, or you're going to cover a break and give that person an extra break, or do that little bit of something that you need to do tomorrow. But this is stuff that you'll get the reward from it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and for a year, by the way, and for 5 years, right? But it's not the immediate. So we look at it, it's that short-term thinking that we have that go and serve the drinks. I think it's kind of trained into us to be very immediate with all the jobs that need doing and all the tasks, and the short-term ones get priority. But yeah, it's a longer term. It's a longer term. Yeah.
Sorry. If I could just add, we've got a number of clients in hospitality who are growing, and I guess my observation is set your team up for success, which I think is what I know you've just said, Ian, which is don't have a handbook which tells everyone everything they can't do. There's nothing worse than going into a shop or a pub or a restaurant, and all it does is tell you what you can't do as a customer. And quite often when I go backstage in the kitchens, everything's don't do this, don't forget that. And it's all in the negative, rather than those successful businesses where they've got 2, 3, 4 different restaurants or outlets. They always do much better on the second, third and fourth. And I think it comes back to what Ian said about by writing down your expectations, by being much clearer on what the service standards are, those staff tend to flourish and tend to develop much more quickly than maybe the first one where you're probably still finding your feet. We're also franchising our own business, and actually the second, the third and the fourth HR office always runs much more efficiently than the first one, where, let's be honest, we've learned from our mistakes.
So
you probably
the trick is to start at number 2.
What I was going to say is that often those problems aren't really problems on your first location, because it's just a small team, right? And with 8 people, whoever you might hire, you can kind of you can get through that. But it is when you do your second or your third, or you expand, and all of a sudden, you know, your team doubles or triples in size. You look back and you think, why isn't this working anymore? Why are we having all these repeated problems? You know, we've all worked in places where kind of, how can we keep it's the same problem over and over and over, and it's not that we don't know what the answer is, but it's like, well, you've got to do it in such a way where fundamentally everything has got to change in your approach to your business. And I think that is completely different maybe if you're on site 2 or 3 as opposed to just kind of, you know, you and the business running it yourself. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. And you either make that change or it all goes tits up, because you can't do what you did on your first business exactly the same on your third. It's completely different.
Just to pull it back a tiny bit, because otherwise I'll keep everybody here forever. I've got one more question to ask. That's a leading question for Peter, and then I'll open up. That was a dead simple one. So with the changes to the way holiday pay is calculated for 0 hours and regular hours staff, is there a preference to the way the holiday year should run, given that the changes are happening in April for any holiday years that commence from April?
Are you asking me that as a payroll provider or as an employer?
Payroll provider. Payroll provider, definitely.
Okay, the payroll provider will, I'm guessing, will always have a view of let's do it from April. Yeah. What do we see in hospitality? We see a number of things. We've seen April is probably the second favourite. The first favourite is January to December. We've also seen recently holiday, which starts when you start in the business. Now that is very difficult to manage because you can never remember what date they've started, and unless you've got a very sophisticated HR or rostering system, it's very difficult to manage. I did see one which was it started on your birthday, but there's no rhyme or reason to that. So I think the answer to that is, one, make sure that you have the same date for everybody in your business, okay? That's probably the most important factor from a payroll perspective. The date, most people would say January to December, and most HR software programs are January to December. However, from a tax and a payroll perspective, the answer is April.
Exactly, you all heard April at the end of that, and that's the one I was going for. I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's purely because from what my understanding is that the 12.07 or 12.09%, it takes effect from the holiday period start after the 1st of April this year. So
The 6th of April.
The 6th of April.
Yeah.
So if you're on a skewed holiday year this year, that your payroll will be more than happy to accommodate to sync everything in line, then it then becomes much easier, and you get the instant benefit of the easier calculations for holiday pay, rather than sending, if anybody that works with us sends an email to Judith or Denise and goes, how many holidays are left? And they then ring me and go, I've got a fucking clue. It's drawn till December and this person's worked 10 hours.
Yeah, the reality is a lot of, you really need to start speaking to your payroll provider about this now, because for something like this to start on the 6th, not even the 1st, and it's 12.09%, actually you are going to have to reconfigure HR systems, payroll systems. You're going to have to speak to your staff who are affected as well. So all of this takes time. So we haven't got much time. So you've got a month. I know this is something we can talk about over a drink at the bar, maybe later on. But do have a little think about it. And if you have got a payroll provider, then start talking to them now about it.
Thank you very much. Questions? I'm going to keep talking if nobody asks a question.
Oh, please ask a question.
I can't run all that way with the mic, I'm sorry, it's on leave.
Should I take them, or should I just ask them?
Oh, go on, there you go. Oh, shout
Hello,
it.
thanks. Hi, everybody. Hi, Ian. This is for you. You said so about the first time you went into Tempest and then 10 people walked through the door and it all fell to pieces, and you said you have to now get strategic about what happens next. I was really interested to know where you start in that moment where you go, we've now got to do something strategic. Where did you start with that strategy?
Yeah, good question. Start with the problem, I think. Start with the problem. That's easier said than done, but one of the things that with these repeated things that constantly just were going wrong all the time was speak to the staff, and generally they will know the answer. Most of the problems that we face, it's not that we don't know what the answer is, it's that we can't stop that repetition happening. And so even down to things like you serve coffee and there's lipstick marks on the cup, like why is this happening again? You know, someone said that, and you tend to kind of do these things where you'll boot off or you'll put a message on a group or one of your WhatsApp groups or whatever it might be, but it doesn't really tend to stop it happening. A few years ago I ended up getting some business coaching as part of this course that I was doing, and actually one of the things that I know get mentioned a lot, but you know, again, it's like point 50 on your to-do list is policies and procedures, and it's just the most dullest thing ever. But if you think, trying to find a sort of a way that you can go, right, how can I make this interesting and engage everybody? Because actually it involves everybody, it involves the business, it's every step of the business. So, you know, that being a live manual, and I said to them, every time we come up with a problem, ask everyone what the solution is, and generally most people will come back with a version of the same answer. And so we did that, and I thought, right, let's put that in a group. Okay, so the coffee cup example here, okay, it's completely obvious how to fix that, but why does it keep happening? The fact that that team was kind of engaged in the problems, and we did it, we kind of put it in a book, and we kind of had this as a sort of, you know, you're never ever going to be able to do a policies and procedure document that's going to be every single answer to every single problem. But as problems come up, if you deal with them and put them there, gradually, you will have that document, and it will be a live document that you will constantly be updating. But to do that rather than, and again, this is probably going back to kind of where I previously worked in the past, being given this doomsday book of negative things, which, you know, if you're just 120 hours a week part-time, you're not going to read this, you're not going to engage with it, but actually, if you feel that you've got skin in the game, that one, your opinion counts of how this bar or restaurant or cafe runs, I think that's all the more powerful, and that will evolve and it will change all the time. So it's a live document. So how we kind of overcame those was being able to sort of take those steps and identify those kind of problems. And as I said before, the answers everybody knows. These aren't these. It's not the. It's the process that is the problem rather than what actually happens. So us fucking up service, people coming through, and then we sit them, never been back. We all know how to deal with this. I mean, some of it, the problem is that you just can't predict what your trade's going to be. So having different formats for different styles of service, what we try to do is take the best of what the chains had and then try and junk out what felt like it would work for us. So by going, you know, okay, so we might open and might only need 2 staff, but then the next day it might be 4. What happens if, for our location at the docks, all of a sudden you just get absolutely slammed? Well, this style of service is something else. Then it becomes like a level 4, which involves X amount of staff, 1 bar back, 1 runner, blah, blah, blah. So it really is, and that just came out of going, okay, let's look at the service, let's look at the problems, let's look what everybody else is doing as well. You know, the people that are doing really, really well, what they do well, and going to places and looking at how stuff works. I really felt stepping outside of your own venue was really important, just literally plotting up. If you've got to do some work, take your laptop and sit in the corner of another location, and one thing that might show you is that one, what you do is way better than other people, or you might look at it and think, wow, we could really learn something here, and what is that? You know, watch and learn all the time, I think.
Thank you very much. The man with the very well-groomed beard, I am impressed.
My name's Aaron. I'm actually a qualified recovery coach based upon my experiences in the industry around addiction. So obviously as like an owner, a trainer and HR, I'm just wondering like what your opinions on it. And is it a conversation that more people are having? Because we've got some of the highest rates of addiction of any industry in the world. And what are sort of your experiences, and is it getting better, or is it something that we need to shine a bit more of a spotlight on?
I think the biggest problem is that that is invisible. That people, if there are addiction issues, generally people are hiding it. And I don't think with everything else that's been done over the last sort of few years, whether it be whistleblowing sexual attacks or misogyny or racism, sexism, homophobia, that stuff very much there is a route to be able to whistleblow or talk to somebody and make sure that's corrected. For addiction, it's strange because we've all worked with people, I'm sure, particularly in hospitality, that have had different levels of addiction, whether it be drugs, gambling, drink, and I guess I can only speak from a personal perspective. When you do notice behaviour, and sometimes you've got to protect your business, you've got to protect your staff, and you make decisions based on what's best for the business and best for your staff. But then you also do have to consider the individual as well. And I think this business, people work late, people sometimes don't have those same social releases that other people would, or we work 9 to 5 and we can go out Friday and Saturday, have our fun. People that leave in work at 12 midnight, don't have a Friday and Saturday off, might just want to go out and get absolutely fucked up, and that's their release, you know. So I think it's about keeping an open dialogue with people and being non-judgmental. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but one thing which I've done, I mean, again, this is just from an independent operator's perspective. I've wanted people to let me know if there's any issues that they need to talk about in absolute confidence. And, you know, with the teams that I've got, there's been many occasions where people have said stuff of that nature, which obviously I've been aware of as an employer, whether it be, and this is again completely sort of confidential, whether you manipulate the rota to allow them to have time off to go to meetings and things like that, which we've kind of done, and even down to stuff like when you're putting, you know, shouts out about, oh, what should we do for the Christmas party and things like that, and that type of stuff. And people, oh, why isn't that person going? You know why they're not there and that they're not present for those things. And I think it's about being, I was going to say a friend, but you've got to be more than that because you are an employee. You can't be that friend, but you do have to be mindful of the fact that there's a responsibility there for you as their boss, and ultimately I do think that you can get, I've found even with stuff where you've had to take that extra time with people and maybe you've had to give them time off, maybe you've had to say, listen, I think you need to go away and sort yourself out. Do come back to me when you feel ready. And I don't think it's serving you well being in this environment because it's really tough. If you've got a drink problem or a drug problem or a gambling problem or whatever it is, to be in environments that we work in, it's all around you at all times. It's not like you're working in an office and you can put it to one side. So it's tough, but I do think you have to make sure that there are clear lines of communication where that person can tell people, and it is done with absolute confidence. I mean, even with people that I've got senior members of the team, they don't know about that stuff. You know, so it is difficult, and you have to take your lead from what that person wants with the addiction problems as well. And
Sharing
what
that
they
you can create a space for them to maybe, like, if they are in recovery, but you're not their sponsor, they can't call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and expect you to be on the phone because they're about to relax.
Well, and this has happened. You've got to set boundaries as well. And there's one young man that I had to say to him, I said, listen, this has to be cruel to be kind, but you can't keep texting me at 12:30 at night, because there were other issues with that as well. I said, you know, I kind of manage in some ways like 50, 60 people, and I have a life as well, and I deal with a lot, and I can't have that emotional stuff that's put on me late night because, you know, it affects me as well. So it is about creating boundaries, which sometimes can be hard if people are suffering as well.
You go down and the whole business goes down. So,
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Jesus Christ. I think it's sign
falling through the floor, that's what it
it's because I'm 18 stone. We're good. Yeah, so it's a tricky one because it's incredibly it's pervasive in society, and it's getting worse overall, right? But I think it's important to, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but create a better working environment. Like there's a reason people who's done an 18, 19, 20-hour shift before, you know what I mean? At the end of it, you just feel pretty numb, right? And you're like, I've got 8 hours before my next shift starts, and I'm not going to get to sleep for another 2 hours anyway, and I just need to make this pain in my legs, pain in the back of my legs, pain in my feet, the stress, the sound, if you ever worked on a production thing, hearing the docket machine going over and over the printer, or someone complained, or someone said the wrong thing to you, going over and over in your head, like, you just want that to go away. And of course that's a reason, right? It's cause and effect, right? We don't attract addicts to the industry. People become addicts in the industry because of circumstance, right? They're drawn to it, and then it becomes a culture, and then obviously there's a lot of factors in there. But this is my other point: is okay, there's a lot you can do in terms of prevention, but it's not. I don't think it should be the responsibility of someone who's, let's say me, when I was not particularly well qualified at a young age, and I should have been in that GM job. I definitely wasn't qualified to be a mental health practitioner as well. We have to wear so many hats, and we're tempted to put on the cape and to try and fix everything ourselves. But I think you're kind of playing with fire a little bit if you try and fix it all and you're not qualified. So I think signposting is the thing I would say is the thing. So having something in place, and you say, I'm not good at this, but I recognise that there's a problem. And I don't actually, by the way, know how to handle this, right? I'm just, from my own personal opinion, I'm just saying it's better to pass them on to someone who is qualified, right? There's charities, there's organisations, there's professionals like yourself. There's also Samaritans, like here's a phone number, give them a call. They can direct to somewhere else. There's mine, there's all these charities. So I think having something in place is the key, right? But I think maybe don't expect too much of yourself, right? And don't get the burnout, right? And don't take it on yourself as well, because if you've got 50 staff, and let's say 30 of them are having mental health problems, good luck, right? Good luck taking all that on yourself as well as everything else you've got to do. So yeah, I think it's really cool that people like you are doing what you're doing as well, because it's needed. Yeah.
The first thing I'd like to say is it takes a very brave person to admit that they've got an addiction. Aaron, you didn't say what addiction or what recovery, but within hospitality, what I see is drugs, alcohol, and probably the next one is gambling. And many people forget about the third addiction, but actually it ruins lives in the same way as the first two might be recreational. The third is usually a hidden addiction. I think from an employment law perspective, let's start there so you know what the basic minimums are. So if somebody is addicted to a substance or to an act, then as an employer they are covered under the Equality Act. So what that means is we need to be sympathetic and we need to make reasonable adjustment. Emphasis on reasonable, okay? What we can't do is what many handbooks say, usually written by lawyers, which says, oh, I know, if you're found to be taking drugs, we'll dismiss you with immediate effect. Actually, you can't really do that. If you steal from the till, you can be dismissed with immediate effect. But actually, I guess you cannot ignore the reality. So the reality is, if people are taking drugs or alcohol dependent, then you're not going to have much of a workforce left if your attitude is, you know what, I'm going to go and sack them. So I guess it's, what are you actually going to do as an employer to help and support them? And I think the one big thing I would say on this point is know where to signpost people to, okay? Know what your first words are going to be when someone says, I need to tell you that I am addicted to heroin. Because your initial reaction is what they are going to remember more than anything else. So, I know this sounds silly, but almost practice it. Have a think about, in the same way as you would your own kids or someone in your family who you love, and then you've got to think about what are you going to say. Because if you say the wrong thing, you could be sued. That is the reality. So have a little think about what is your strategy for someone who comes and says that they have an addiction. And my suggestion, my advice would be, be sympathetic. Don't try and be their counsellor, their coach. Make sure you know where to signpost them to, and then let the experts do their job. That would probably be the advice I would give. I guess the hard bit is when you find out from a third party that somebody has an addiction, or you find out by accident as an employer. And it's usually when things go missing, or someone is acting maybe slightly different than the way you would expect them to. And I guess, I know every one of us is different, and every person's reason for maybe becoming addicted is different as well. So have the conversation. Don't have it by yourself, have it with someone there as a witness. And it's important to have a witness because people's sense of reality is sometimes different when they're under the influence. So have someone there with you, but talk to them about it. Ask them what you can do to help and support them. Okay? Ask them who's helping them, who's supporting them, where are they up to in their journey, and only then can you start to then put together a strategy of how you can help and support that person in employment.
I've got to say with that, there's two things, isn't there? If it's one thing if they're addicted to drugs and that happens outside of their premises. If you go into the kitchen and find them chopping out on the side or a member of staff's doing it on the toilets on shift, it's completely different. There is a consideration of one, you've got to look after the business, second, you've got to look after the staff, and a health and safety aspect with, is that going to impair their job as well? So, particularly even with drinking and stuff, it's that if someone's drinking on shift, then that is a completely different set of circumstances to if someone's coming a bit bleary from, the 10th hangover that, on the bounce and stuff. So,
It's also theft as well.
It's also theft as well, yeah. So, I think you do have to judge it by the circumstance that it is, really.
I think that's one of them topics that could go on for a very, very long time. And I come from a hospitality background as well, and I've definitely got my tuppence worth to say on that, but I won't.
Can I just say one thing about Samaritans? Samaritans is a listening service. So if someone comes to you and says they're going to self-harm or take their own life, you don't get them to call the Samaritans because they can't tell them not to do it. So there are suicide hotlines out there, and there are amazing ones out there, but you don't want to give them the wrong number. But a lot of people, they are amazing, but a lot of people do confuse that sometimes.
I grab you at the end and just take a few details because I'll fire out an email over the next couple of days, and I'll include stuff of that at the bottom because to me it's incredibly important because when I was in the industry, the support was, should we go for a pint?
Yeah.
And that works in some cases, but not when that's the addiction. I'm going to get Evil Arsh in the back of the room in a moment, so if I take one more question, and then obviously the rest of us are going to be here for hopefully a few hours more to answer anything else that anybody's got. Has anybody else got a question? Or do you all really want a pint? Within reason? No, we're all good. I think that means everybody wants to go to the bar. So on that point, we'll wrap it up. Thank you all very much for listening. If you've got any questions. Don't know how to end that, so we're all just going to get up and go to the bar. You just want to sit up here? My arse.
Right?